Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I am here for part 2 to bands that I have lost interest in. Now, some of these bands I used to like, some to a lesser extent, some to a higher extent, and once again, these are from all different times of my life pretty much. And yeah, if you haven't seen the first part, feel free to go check that out. It's on my channel, so go search for that. This is going to be part 2, so yeah, let's go ahead and begin. This is not in any particular order, by the way, either. So the first band I think we'll get into is AC/DC. Now, AC/DC, you could make the argument that I was never really that heavily into them, since, back in my youth, I was really into a handful of songs. I mean, I was into some of their big hits like Shoot the Thrill, Back in Black, Thunderstruck, Razor's Edge, and some others. And then, some years later, I went to check out some albums, Back in Black, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. I think AC/DC is a good band for what they are. I think what they do fine. I just think that there's better in classic rock. Like, if I wanted to listen to classic rock, I wouldn't be listening to AC/DC. I'd be listening to Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith or Van Halen, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah. I think AC/DC is also very overrated. Not a band that I think is worth all the praise, and I think that their music can be a little samey as well. Now, even though that's the case, samey doesn't always mean necessarily it's a bad thing, but it's kind of a bad thing with AC/DC. I mean, I'll just say that, but again, not a bad band. I mean, again, everything that they do fine, but I don't know. They're a band that just has kind of dropped off for me. Not a band that I don't think I could ever see myself investing in furthermore, even though, I was even into them a little bit. But AC/DC is a band that I really don't listen to anymore. Now, believe it or not, there was a time where I actually considered AC/DC my favorite band. Now, keep in mind, this was when I was like 14 years old. This was back when I really didn't listen to much music. Anytime someone would ask me, like, who's my favorite music artist or my favorite band or whatever, I would just always say AC/DC, since, those few songs were like all that I ever listened to, so, yeah. AC/DC, I felt like they deserved a place on this list. Now, again, you could argue that I was never really into the band to begin with, but I don't know. I feel like they deserve a place on this list since, I'm not really that interested in diving into them furthermore, pretty much. So the next artist up, we got Knives. Now, Knives is Demon Hunter frontman Ryan Clark's side project. This is an electronic project formed by Ryan Clark and one of the members from Project 86. And, Knives was kind of a funny story for me personally. Whenever I first listened to them, the first song I heard from them was Fall Behind, I think that's what it's called. And I remember really not digging it that much. And then eventually, I believe the year after, that's when I really started to get into Knives. Or actually, it might have been later in the year, because I remember it came out in 2015, and I remember, actually, yeah, I think it was, I think they first released singles in 2014. I think that's what happened. Sorry about the confusion, but yeah, I think I did get into them in 2015, as far as I remember. But yeah, I just know it was either 2015 or 2016. Now, the one thing you have to understand is around this time, 2014, 2015, 2016, I was just, like Ryan Clark's biggest fan at the time. I mean, I would just, listen to whatever Ryan Clark had, and, in terms of his music projects and stuff. Now, I don't like all of his projects. Like, lo and behold, I personally just can't get into that project. I know some people, some Ryan Clark fans and Demon Hunter fans do like that project, but I don't know. I'm just not too into that project. I think that they're just kind of boring, But with Knives, I do like the electronic music that they, create and what they come out with, but I don't know. Now, there's actually a few reasons why Knives doesn't exactly do it for me these days. For one, the replay value. Now, the replay value could be because they don't have that many albums out right now. They only have one album and one EP out right now. We're still waiting on that second album, which they announced like a few years ago now. And I know that, I've made videos before covering that, like hyping up that new album, like, oh, we're going to get a new Knives album. And here we are, a few years down the road and we still don't have it. And I will admit, that is something that has kind of made me lose interest in Knives. The fact that we're still yet to get any new Knives music. I was hoping that 2020 would be the year, but it honestly doesn't look like it. I mean, we're like past the middle of the year now. Like, we're in the second half of the year now, and we still don't, have any announcement for the album or anything. So I don't think it's going to come out this year. But I could be wrong. I mean, it still could come out this year, but I'll be honest with you guys, I really don't think that we're going to get this new Knives album anytime soon. I know. It may sound disappointing, but yeah. But even these days when I do listen to Knives, I honestly get kind of bored, as crazy as that sounds. Now, again, back in the day, whenever I used to listen to Demon Hunter a lot, again, I would just listen to whatever I liked from Ryan Clark's music projects. So, of course, Knives was a band that really did it for me, So, yeah, but I think now that the fandom with Demon Hunter is not totally low, but kind of decreased in and of itself, I feel like now Knives is kind of in that place where, they're just kind of sitting in the back seat pretty much. Like, I don't know. I just don't think that they do much for me these days. So, yeah. And I definitely prefer Demon Hunter over Knives. As a matter of fact, I might even prefer Training for Utopia over Knives. That was Ryan Clark's first band. But yeah, Knives, I mean, again, what they do good, but I just don't really find the appeal with their music that much these days. I think I honestly get kind of bored with their music anymore. So they had to be on the list. Definitely a music artist that I've lost interest in. Next up, we got Skillet. Now, Skillet, funny story about Skillet. I think the main reason I was into them was because, they were pretty much the talk of the town at the time, pretty much, back in 2012, 2013, around that time. For those who don't know, I was very much involved in youth groups and church groups and stuff like that growing up, and especially during my teenage years, I was very much, involved. And Skillet was a big deal in those groups. I mean, I don't know if that was the case, in other areas, but that's definitely the case around here. I mean, Skillet is definitely, like, they were definitely the big deal. Like, a lot of people, especially within the Christian community, thought that, like, Skillet was, like, the heaviest Christian band out there, which, not even close. Even Red is heavier than them, and Red's not even the heaviest, so, yeah, there's that. I do think that Skillet is overrated, though. I think that's one problem I have with them. I think that they're super overrated. If I wanted to listen to their style of hard rock, I would just listen to, again, Red, Breaking Benjamin, or even Shinedown, Like, with Skillet, there's nothing special about them. Overrated band, and, yeah. And I personally am not a fan of that, male vocal and female vocal back and forth idea. Now, I know some people like that idea, and that's fine, but that personally just doesn't do much for me. I don't know how I would describe my complaint with that in particular, but I think the best way I could describe it is it's kind of edgy. But yeah, there's a lot about Skillet that doesn't really do it for me. The fan base, cringe. I mean, there's a lot of things about Skillet that really, have really made me left the fan base. And again, you could even argue that I was barely even a Skillet fan because, you know, I only listened to, you know, the 2000s albums, mainly talking about Collide, Comatose, and Awake, which Awake is one of the most overrated 2000s rock albums of all time, I think. Yeah. I used to really dig those albums, and honestly, not anymore. I don't even listen to the stuff that I used to like, not even for nostalgia factor. But yeah, Skillet, some of you might not even know that I was even into them at one point, but yeah, I was. So they had to be on the list. Next up, we got Project 86. Now, Project 86 I got into, I believe, in 2015. 2015 was when I got into them, but in 2016, I remember that's when I really started to dive deeper into their catalog more. You know, like Knives and AC/DC, what they do good, but I don't know. I just don't think that there's really anything special about their music. I think they're just kind of mediocre, if you know what I mean. You know, they're just kind of simplistic. Now, simplicity isn't always a bad thing, you know, for those who don't know. I mean, I don't usually have a problem with simplicity, but the thing is with Project 86, again, like with Skillet, there's just better bands out there that make this style of music. And I don't even listen to this style of music much anymore, you know, like this hard rock style of music. Like, I don't listen to that music anymore, or at least not as much as I did back in my youth, of course. And anytime I do listen to it, you know, it's going to be the bands that I mentioned before, you know. Project 86, again, what they do okay, but I don't know. There's just nothing really special about their music. So yeah, I had to put Project 86 on the list. Next up, we got The Devil Wears Prada. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes I will go back to a few songs from these guys, but mainly for the nostalgia reasons. Because The Devil Wears Prada was actually one of my first metalcore bands. They actually might have been my second. Because I think that they were my second. I got into them like after I got into Demon Hunter, I think. If you don't count Dead by April, of course, which, if you know, Dead by April was in the last list. So, yeah. But The Devil Wears Prada, I mean, I just, their sound is kind of emo. Like, looking back, like, whenever it was, you know, my first year of college, like, whenever I look back at those days, I just think, like, how in the world was I into this style of music? Like, this, you know, type of, you know, edgier metalcore style of music. But the thing is I think that was the appeal for me at the time. The fact that it was, you know, more on the edgy side, you know. Now again, I'll return to The Devil Wears Prada certain songs for nostalgia reasons, but it's not all the time. And their new stuff, that's something I gotta mention. Their new stuff is terrible. I mean, their latest album, The Act, it's still, in my opinion, the worst album of 2019. I mean, there's nothing redeeming about that album. There's not a single song I like on that album, and it's easily their worst album. And the thing is, like, I don't know, like, their sound is very emo, and the lyrics over time have gotten kind of bland, kind of unoriginal, if you know what I mean. I can definitely think of a lot of problems with The Devil Wears Prada, like, and their themes, and just, there's a lot of things I can find wrong with them, like, I don't know, but I'll just leave it at that. The Devil Wears Prada had to make the list. So the last band up, we got The Bunny the Bear. Now, again, some of you might not know that I was ever into this band, or some of you might not even know who this band is. Yeah, The Bunny the Bear is definitely a weird band for sure. Probably one of the weirdest bands that I was ever into in my musical journey. I mean, the lyrics are interesting for sure, and the music itself that these guys create just obnoxious, annoying, and it's hard to say what exactly what genre they're in, you know? Like, they definitely have some metal, of course, especially in their earlier work. They definitely have metal in their earlier work, but it's like metal fused with like pop and dance electronic elements, you know? I mean, if you listen to the Bunny the Bear, you know what I'm talking about. Like, they kind of have like their own identity, which I will say is unique, but I don't know. These days, I'm not the biggest fan of them. Their sound just kind of annoys me overall, but yeah. That's all I can really say about them. So the Bunny the Bear, they had to make the list. Well, there you have it, guys. That is another list of more bands that I have lost interest in. Now, maybe some of you might be surprised that I even made a part 2, since, you know, because most of the time when people get into some bands, they usually get into them or are into them for a long time. But I went through many phases, you know, many, weird places in my musical journey, I guess. But that's part 2. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.